We're live.
I don't know what's happening. Mine keeps going off.
I can hear Terry.
My phone keeps going. Something keeps happening. My phone keeps going off.
Comrade Terry, I'll call you,
I don't know
but we're live now, and I'll help you fix it.
Good morning. مساء الخير. Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. And welcome to the AMED First 2021 Open Classroom, The Spirit of 68, From Third World Studies to Palestine, a conversation with Black Student Union and Third World Liberation Front strike veterans. Before we proceed with any part of the program, we will, as always, engage in acknowledging the land, the stolen land on which we are convening and where San Francisco State is. And before that, we turn to Comrade Tomasita Medal, please.
We acknowledge that San Francisco is Nielamu Ohlone and Ramaytush Ohlone land. We ask these ancestors for permission to hold this gathering in this space today. We acknowledge the indigenous ancestors of Palestine, Africa, Abya, Asia, and throughout the world. We remember you and we love you. We ask all of our ancestors to imbue us with indigenous instincts, insights, wisdom, and resiliency as we work to strengthen our communities and bring about justice.
Thank you, Comrade. We are also take the opportunity to honor all the fallen heroes from Minneapolis, Oakland, San Francisco, to Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, to people in Palestine, to people in South Africa, to people throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, and the settler colonies of Australia, New Zealand, and the Western Hemisphere. We also acknowledge and feel a sense of sadness for the most recent anti-Asian violence that had just committed in Atlanta 2 days ago. And we pledge that part of what we are doing, which is the production of knowledge for justice, which you all started back in 1968 and earlier, we will continue this in order to eliminate all these forms of racism and racial discrimination. I want to read from the flyer that we put out. On March 20, 1969, the longest student strike in US history ended with the victorious creation of the College of Ethnic Studies, led by Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front. Students demanded the decolonization of Eurocentric curriculum, university accountability and transparency, and a school of third world studies. Today, a perennial Zionist, right-wing, and white supremacist campaign is threatening to recolonize California ethnic studies curriculum, silence Palestine, police and suppress campus activism, and privatize our public education. In this first 2020 AMED Virtual Open Classroom, students will meet face-to-face with the legendary leaders who inspired the spirit of 68 as they share oral histories and respond to some of the questions on our mind. How did students come together? And what were the factors that allowed them to stay resolute in their struggle? What challenges did they confront as they faced off a hostile administration, the governor of California, SF Police, the National Guard, and the FBI, to name a few? Who had their back? And what did students sustain? How did students sustain their solidarities? What lessons can we draw from today's renewed battle for the just soul of our campuses and public education in the context of the pandemic and corporatization? I just want to add a couple of words here that I've met many of the legendary leaders today. In 2008, I had just started at San Francisco State as a faculty member, and I was sitting in room E116 in the College of Ethnic Studies. And history walked in. History literally walked in. Many of you came, and that's where I met you. And I was in so much awe. And there were so many people who were in that room that are no longer with us today. Many people that we will take time throughout this program today to remember their names. I know one of the people contacting me, it was Ramadan, and the Muslims among us were fasting. Damira Ahmed, may she rest in power, said, "Are you the Palestinian sister?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I want to talk to you." I named my daughter Layla after the Palestinian legendary leader Layla Khaled. And I said, "Oh my God." She said, "You know?" I said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "You know, I have her autobiography. Would you like?" And she said, "Yes." I sent it to her, and we continued communicating. Then, when we did the strike, we organized something called a panel, which I will show you in a minute, called the Spirit of Bandung, to which we've invited many of you. And that panel is actually posted on the San Francisco State Diva website. And we didn't know at the time that there were so many participants at that time in the strike, as well as in the movement, who had historically been connected and linked to Arab, Muslim, Palestinian studies, communities, then and now. And I'm not going to speak about people who are here because you can tell your own stories. But I know that at that time, and we continued a very long relationship, we continue honoring, respecting, in awe of what you have done then. It must have been really difficult from all accounts. And so today, we want to hear from all of you. We want to learn, we want to discuss, and it's just one of our oral history intergenerational conversations between elders. And I became 65 in May, so I sort of like consider myself, I'm a senior citizen, right? But I'm in awe of all of you.
So am I.
All role models for me, and many other people who actually mentored me and led me to be where I am today. And so we stand on the shoulders of all of you and many people who came before all of us. I turn it over to Salim now. I'm going to try to save my voice because I'm just coming out of illness. I'm going to turn it over to Salim.
Hi, everybody. Before I begin, I just wanted to show the images that Comrade Rabab was referring to. I'm going to go through them quickly. My apologies. This is the first flyer. And let me go ahead and show the second flyer. And this is the second one on the 40th anniversary. All right.
If we have time, I would like to even go through the story of each flyer. The flyer in 2008, we put Yuri Kuchiyama's image on top of the image of the Black Panthers, because that was an image that was taken out of the Malcolm X mural at SFSU, the early one, the first mural. And there were a lot of controversy around that. So each one, I mean, even designing the flyer, we can talk about it, but we're not going to talk about it today because this is for hearing from all of you. But you can also see the panel. We also have the video of the panel where people are speaking. We have videos of all the panels. We actually archive.
Thank you. So as part of today's AMED Open Classroom event, I just wanted to start off by thanking our co-sponsors that help bring this programming to you all. First, we have the amazing team that is part of the AMED program, including Comrade Rabab and Comrade Anais, who is watching with us. Hi, Anais. And we also have Comrade Daisy, who did wonderful flyering for us as well. I also wanted to thank Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network for their sponsorship of the event and their continued sponsorship through the AMED Teaching Palestine series, as well as the fact that we are broadcasting on multiple channels right now. So we are broadcasting on the AMED Facebook page, but we're also broadcasting to the National Students for Justice in Palestine Facebook page and their YouTube page, as well as broadcasting onto the Palestinian Youth Movement's page as well. So thank you all for that. This is going to be a wonderful engagement with a lot of youth movement workers who are doing Palestine advocacy work, as well as advocacy for their communities at large and for the issues at large. So it is wonderful being in this space with you all. And as an AMED Open Classroom, we also have a number of San Francisco State University students who are watching and participating now and in the future with these recordings. With that, I wanted to just maybe very briefly position why I am here. My name is Salim. I am currently a PhD student in anthropology at UCLA, where my research is on Palestinian student organizing, looking at the General Union of Palestine Students. I began that project back when I did my master's at San Francisco State University in 2015. And I have worked with Comrade Rabab and the AMED program ever since then. I also did my master's in anthropology, where documenting the oral histories of the General Union of Palestine students from 2000 to 2017. And prior to that, I joined Students for Justice in Palestine in my undergrad at UC Davis back in 2011. Where we pushed a divestment resolution. So we've been organizing student organizing for 10 years at this point. We keep going. So with that, I think we can transition into asking kind of the first set of questions. For those who are just joining, the way that we're structuring this is we intended to have a more dynamic conversation rather than having pre-planned papers to give. So we're going to go through, and each panelist is going to discuss briefly a response to the question in groups of 4 or 5. Then we'll transition into a response where another 4 or 5 strikers will then give their kind of feedback, responses, maybe putting into context of today's movement work and what that means in the larger struggle. So it's going to be a back and forth, a call and response, as I know we've done in the past, and we're going to have 4 rounds of that. So it's going to be fast moving, and we're going to try and really have a lively, organic conversation. With that, maybe I'll go ahead and ask the first question to you all, and it is: how did students come together, and what were the factors that allowed them to stay resolute in their struggles? The floor is open.
Sharon Jones, is that?
Yes.
I think Comrade Terry wanted you to start off with.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, dear. Please repeat the question.
Yeah, so it is: how did students come together, and what were the factors that allowed them to stay resolute in their struggle?
Okay. Well, I was a 17-year-old high school student. I was attending Balboa High School in San Francisco. And at the time, it was during the time where, Black Power was, we were right in there. Everything was black this. And, we were learning our roots. We were going back to Africa. And, it was just a very, very, it was a good time then, very good times then. I was raised in the church. I'm a church girl. And I was never allowed really to really do anything outside of my church. All of my activities were around geared around our church. And Benny Stewart, who was he's a preacher's kid. I don't know if you all know that, but he's a preacher's kid, and he was the chairman of the BSU. He lived next door to us. And it was through Benny Stewart and Terry Collins, Danny Glover, and I think it was it was one other person, Donald Smothers. They came to Balboa High School in 1968 during the year that I was to graduate. They came there to recruit students. I always wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to do something with my life, but I really wasn't prepared to do what I wanted to do in school. So this was a very good opportunity for me to attend college with with the BSU coming and recruiting us. So that's how I became involved with the BSU, with the strike. We had community support, and it was a different time back then. We had a camaraderie. Everyone was, even it was just so much going on. We were trying to make a difference back then. And with the, I'm sorry, you all got me trying to get this out. So anyway, so it was with the BSU coming to our school, recruiting us, and taking us under their wings and exposing us to just so many things. Like I said, I was not really allowed to express myself, my Blackness, or anything. What I had to do was go back and forth to church, and that's all I knew. But these brothers came, and they just came to Balboa and changed all of our lives. They just opened up. I mean, it was just, we were reading, we were learning. They had the experimental college back then. It was just so many things that we became involved in. And I mean, we just became radicalized back then. Black is beautiful. And we never even realized that Black was beautiful until, this time, this period in our history. So it was a very wonderful time. And we were able to stay together because we believed in what we were doing. And, we had everyone, the community was behind us. And, it's, I hope I was able to. All right. So, that's it. I mean, and here I am today. I'm a professor now in the college that we struggled. This is a real, and once I was in the classroom, I'm saying, like, wow, it was bittersweet. I'm sitting there and I'm crying because I'm saying, wow, this is what we did. We did this. We believed in what we were doing. We struck. My first semester was spent on the lines and going to jail. I went to jail and out before my mother even knew that I went to jail. That's how everyone worked together. And how tight this thing was back then. So, and I'm very thankful that I'm here today because of 1968. I can actually teach my students the right history, and they love it. They're saying, wow, I mean, they're at state. There's so many students at state that don't even know what went on back then. And I think that's a travesty. But here I am.
Thank you, Sharon. We will go now. We will take the order of Roger next, and then we will have Margaret, Steve, Terry, Diane, and Tomasita, and Carmen. Do you want to respond, or do you want, hi, Carmen, welcome. So should we just, for this session, for this round, do 2 minutes each, and then for the next rounds, we will do 2 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute, so we can keep within the time. So everybody gets a chance to have their opinion. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So, Roger, I'm going to Alan's message.
Sure. In 68, I had been on the campus for about 8 years. I came back to the campus actually in the fall of 68 after having done some work in the Mission District. Before that time, I'd been involved in a number of the student programs that people have already mentioned. Returning to school in 68, I became involved in a Latin American student organization, which consisted of certainly no more than 18 people. I can specifically remember a dozen that were fairly active and took certain leadership roles throughout the various organizations during the strike. We were brought into the TWLF in 68, and we're aware that some things were going to be happening as far as Black studies was concerned. There hadn't been a lot of discussion as far as third world studies were concerned. However, the attention that was developed around Black studies really did focus on us realizing the importance of developing curriculum and analysis of where we stood historically in the history of not only this country, but also the world. In November, when the Black Student Union, after a series of confrontations and the lack of any results towards their establishing a Black Studies program within the system, called for a strike. The first few days after the call of that strike, there was a lot of discussion, not only within each of the organizations that made up the Third World Liberation Front, but also among the various groups. And it wasn't until 2-3 days after that initial date of the strike start that the vote was taken within the TWLF to not only support the Black Students Union demands for Black studies, but also to include, along with their demands, the demands for the development of a College of Third World Studies. It was during this time, and certainly throughout the strike, that there were a number of different instances when there were various opinions and strategies that were perfect. I want to acknowledge, though, that the unifying element that sustained all of the discussions and allowed us to go in with whatever different views we had and come out with a consensus as to what we were going to do, not only the next day, but the next week and the next month, had to do with racism, fundamentally racism. Racism and the way in which a class structure, racism is used to distinguish and subjugate people to a position of a lower status. And it was this common experience, whether you're Japanese or you're Black or you're Chinese or you're Chicano or Latino, Filipino, it didn't matter. We all shared and acknowledged what it was to be living in a racist system that had integrated into its functioning the principle of denigrating people of color and taking advantage of those attitudes that were pervasive throughout the larger society to sustain the status that we had at that time, which I think is reflected if you look at the student body percentages of the people of color that were in school at that time.
You, Roger. Margaret?
Am I supposed to go next? Okay. I came to San Francisco State as a working class white kid. raised in San Francisco in the Sunset, Irish American. And I went to work at 15, where for the first time I was exposed to people who were making racist comments, acting in a way that I found absolutely abhorrent. And there wasn't anything I could do about it because at 15 I needed the work. I came home and my mother and I would discuss it. When I went to state, I wasn't political. I had, I think, good ideas in the back of my head, but had no concept of how to put them together. And the first time I got involved was when 2 groups of students were suspended. And Jeff Poland was alleged to have written a pornographic poem about the football coach. And so he was suspended. Then members of the Black Student Union confronted Jim Vasco of the Gator, the student paper, and the struggle broke out. And the Black students were suspended, not Vasco. What happened was the president, pardon? Oh, the president of the college readmitted the white student because we were saying you can't suspend people without any proof that they'd done anything. They had not been convicted of anything. He brought the white student back in and kept the Black students out because he said they were violent. And that was, to me, racist. And being a stubborn Irish shanty woman, I joined everyone else. And I marched to the administration building and broke in. I was way far above my political understandings, but I learned by working with and learning from the people that I was with. And I think what was really important was I came in at a level I was capable of understanding. You don't give a punishment to someone before they're found guilty. Okay. And from there, I went on, and I think it's important for people to understand that not everyone is going to be at the same level that they are immediately. What you have to do is bring people from where they are to where they need to go. And during the strike itself, that's what happened, at least insofar as the people I knew. Not everyone was politically astute. Most people had not read Marx or Mao, but people had good ideas and they had good hearts, and you have to bring them along. I still haven't read all of Marx, and I doubt that I ever will because he was so verbose. But it was important for me that everyone that I met worked with me and never thought my questions were stupid, but worked with me to let me understand what was going on. And I think that's how people were brought in. That's how people were maintained. And we also had a camaraderie. People understood that other people had their back. And when that happens, it really can be a strong movement. As someone said, you know, here's your hand. That doesn't have much power to put all those fingers together, you know, and it sucks someone in the face or kick them.
Good. Steve? You're muted.
I'm interested.
So I came to San Francisco State in 1967. I was 17 years old, and it was bubbling up. It was like bubbling up. The first week I was there was an occupation by a professor, led by a professor at the administration building, which I mean, I was learning from the professors right there in my first couple of weeks. So to have a professor breaking into a administration building for an occupation, to see that as a student, well, this is getting an education about what's going on in this country. That was incredible, actually, you know. And I was politically involved before. My father had gone to the South as a lawyer to register people to vote in the 60s, my father and mother. So my family, and also had organized against fascist attacks in San Jose by the Ku Klux Klan. So my family was political, and I became involved in SDS, which was a multiracial organization during the strike. And there was a debate in SDS about the BSU and Third World Liberation Front, about whether we should support it. And there was a struggle, but what we had is the idea of a united front, which is really what we need today in the United States and internationally. We need a united front to unite ourselves around race issues, fighting racism and class issues, uniting working people. And I worked as a library worker at San Francisco State. We had a union there. And after the strike took place, the ILWU, and this is critical, the Longshore Union, supported the strike and invited us to work on the docks, those who were on strike, including professors. So that was my first taste of a real union struggle. And the ILWU was formed in a general strike in San Francisco in 1934. So I saw the power of the working class. And that is one of the reasons the National Guard was never called into the strike at San Francisco, because Ronald Reagan at that time, who made his career attacking our strike, wanted to call in the National Guard to bust it up. However, the Labor Council and the AFT at San Francisco State supported the strike. The teachers were supporting the strike as well. And so we got the support of the Labor Council and the ILWU. And I think Reagan was very concerned that if they called in the National Guard, there would have been a general strike in San Francisco against the use of the National Guard. But that did not stop Alioto at that time calling the tactical squad and attacking and beating people. And the kind of attacks that we saw there happened in Black Lives Matter protests all over this country, where the police are beating people, arresting them, terrorizing them. And so the same struggle that we had in the 60s was today, same thing. And the same use of racism and that kind of thing. So, it's very familiar. So what we saw is, what I saw is the need to unite with workers. And I know during the strike, we had a support of the oil workers who are on strike. Right now, there's a struggle of the Bessemer workers in Alabama. So we see our struggle to unite, not just where we are, but with workers all over, because the oppression, the racism, the systemic racism against working people in this country is tremendous. The frontline workers who are dying because they're forced to go into factories with COVID. These are the same things that exist. And I think that the lesson of the strike was we stay united despite the police, hundreds of police every day. We went out to the community and we got support in the community. We worked with the community against the attack of people in the community. So that was a very powerful thing. And I think to unite the community, the working class and the unions, and together fight for class demands is critical. And today, the same thing, because Black, Latino students, look at UC, where there are less than 5% Blacks at University of California. There's systemic racism. I mean, the same issues we face today. So I think that we today have, with the internet, which we didn't have then, the ability to have this forum and to reach out internationally, not only in the United States, but internationally, to unite our struggle. And that, I think, is critical today in our struggle that we're going through.
Yeah. And that's what we don't have today. We don't have that solidarity with any group.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. I think next is going to be Terry.
Probably let Diane Feeney speak first, because she has to leave at 12 o'clock. Diane, why don't you go?
Okay, Diane and Carmen. If you want Diane and Carmen to go.
Carmen got to leave too?
Yeah. No, she didn't. She doesn't have to leave. She's staying. Okay. But Diane, Carmen.
Jerry, I don't have to leave if you want to go next, or I can go next, whatever.
Go on next.
Okay.
I mean, go ahead.
All righty. So unlike some of the others, I wasn't a young high school student. I'd already graduated from San Francisco State, but came back because my mother died and I had to take care of my family. And in fact, I had worked with the Black Student Union before I came to San Francisco State as a graduate student, because a fifth grade teacher in the Fillmore district announced to her class she didn't know why she bothered with them, because they were all going to grow up to become pimps and prostitutes.
Whoa.
And the children went home and told their parents, and the parents called in the the San Francisco Civil Commission, who found out that actually that's what she had said. And the Black students and a local pastor set up a freedom school. And I went down to volunteer and ended up being in charge of the first, second, and third grade. So then I went back to San Francisco State, and it was, I think, like today. Some people were political, but a lot of people weren't. However, one of the big differences was at that point, San Francisco State was virtually free. My tuition was probably, I don't know, $65 a semester. So I could afford to go back as a graduate student. And I was already active in the anti-war movement, and on campus, I got involved. There was a huge struggle around kicking ROTC off campus. I was almost clubbed by the police at one point, and Terry Hallinan came in and took the blow instead and got arrested and spent the next several years fighting against the felony charge that was brought against him. So that summer, I was very active. I was the office manager for the GI Civilian March for Peace, which marched in October of '68 with active duty GIs. And so I arrived back on campus after things had already been percolating in October. But as a white student who was active in the Young Socialist Alliance at that time, it wasn't clear to us whether this was just going to be a third world strike or whether white students were invited to participate. So first of all, we clarified that. And they said, sure, if you want to get involved, get involved. I don't think they really understood that we would get involved. What was really critical at the beginning of the strike was the fact that the third world students challenged the San Francisco State administration to a debate, which took place the first, 2 or 3 days, was absolutely fantastic, with students getting up and explaining what they wanted and needed out of an education and how they had been recruited to San Francisco State to have a meaningful education and how they had become so disappointed. And I think that and by the end, the administration just walked off the stage, which was a tremendous victory for the third world students and really solidified so that everybody understood what the strike was about. It was about human dignity. And the white students, some were anti-racist, but even if they weren't, they understood that Black students and other brown students were being humiliated, and that they too, in their own alienated way, were humiliated, and they wanted to stand up. And that's what gave us the strength to endure the incredible repression that was unleashed against us.
Can't hear you, Rabab.
Carmen, do you wanna and Tomasita next, and then we'll go back, circle back to Terry. Go ahead, please. You're muted, Carmen. How about we go to Tomasita while you're not muted, but we can't hear you. How about we go, Salim, maybe you can work with Tomasita and then, with Carmen, Tomasita, do you want to go next? and then we'll come back to Carmen. Is that okay?
Yes, no problem.
Unmute yourself, Tomasita.
There.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to say hello. Assalamu alaikum to everybody around the world who's watching this. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So I forgot what the question was, because now it sounds like it's people telling about how they.
The question is, how did you join? How did students join? What were the early, like this question is about the early days of the strike.
Okay. What had happened was that the whole country was in rebellion. The consciousness of the country was united because of the Vietnam War, because the Vietnam War was taking away so many black and brown young men in those days to fight and die in Vietnam. And of course, it was unfair because wealthy people could get student deferments or go to Canada or have their doctor declare that they had bone spurs. So people were not going. So the people who were actually going to die in Vietnam were the people of color, and so that had raised the consciousness of the whole country. And so the strike was a product of the time, of the intellectual atmosphere of the time, and at the same time, Cassius Clay said, "I'm Muhammad Ali, and black is beautiful," and so that sent a wave of consciousness that black is beautiful across the country. And then the students at San Francisco State voted in a progressive slate of students led by Russell Bass, and what they proposed was to use the money from the student body fees that everybody had to pay, which I think was $10 per person per semester, but that adds up. And until then, that money used to go to supporting the varsity activities and the cheerleaders of the sports teams. And the Russell Bass slate proposed using that money to create 5 programs that served the community. And so those programs, if I can recall correctly, was Draft Help, which did counseling for young people to see if they could get away from being drafted, right, or to resist the draft. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
There was the experimental college, of which I was the secretary, and next door was the Community Services Institute, or community organizing, and Roger Alvarado was a staff person, a community organizer. I didn't know what he did, but eventually I witnessed how he organized the community. And there was the tutorial program, in which we went down into the projects, and they had the revolutionary idea that that white students would be best counseling white poor kids, and that Latino students would be more successful tutoring Latino kids in the projects, which I participated in, and black students would be more effective tutoring black kids. In other words, that people would be more effective, and the community would be more receptive if the students who came down to tutor them had cultural affinity with them. And so, am I missing one of the projects, Roger, or did I cover them? Is that all the projects? You're muted.
Roger, you're muted.
You're muted, Roger. Okay. You're muted. We can't hear you. Did I cover?
Oh, now he's good.
Do you got it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have it now? Yeah.
Project? Okay, so then, so with for example, the Community Services Institute, or it became Community Services, Community Organizing Project, people like Roger went down into the community, and I witnessed when he called a summit for all the gangs in the mission. and they were all fighting each other and knifing each other. And he called this summit in a playground. And that night, all the kids came together, and they were all in their black leather jackets, looking tough. And he talked to them. He just talked to them and communicated and said, "Look, which you're doing just what the man wants. You're fighting each other. You're disunited. You're killing each other. That's playing into the man's agenda. Instead, you should unite, stop fighting each other, elect your officers, and then go down to the downtown stores and ask for jobs in the summer vacation and in the Christmas holiday." So that night they did. They united and they formed the East Mission United Neighborhood Youth Organization. They elected Palestine as their president, and then eventually they went down and negotiated for jobs. They went up and down the 24th Street business corridor and asked each merchant to give $5 a month so they could rent a clubhouse, so they could all hang out together instead of being having no place to hang out and standing in front of people's stores, intimidating the customers. And so then the customers didn't come in because they were afraid of these kids with black leather jackets. So I witnessed what it was that Roger did as a community organizer, and it's all about communication. And so because he just talked to the kids and showed them another view of reality, then he brought about peace, which lasted for quite some time in the community and unity. And so my point with this is, and then of course out of that, the community, this kind of work, the tutorial work and the draft help and the community services, community organizing, we had connection and communication with the community in the city, because this was going on because there were different organizations, like there was the Latino, we belonged to the eventually the Latin American Student Organization, and then there was the Black Student Union, each community, Asian American student. So each ethnic group was doing the same kind of service in their community, because our mentality at the time was that we go to San Francisco State to become servants of the people, to develop our minds as instruments of service to the community. And so since we all had that consciousness, we went back to our respective communities and served them. And so then when the strike happened, we already had this huge base in the community. And so the community backed us up. Thank you.
Carmen, how are you doing? Can you? Oh, I see you talking. We can't. Oh, now try again.
Can't hear you, Carmen.
Carmen, maybe you can turn off your sound and turn it back on again. Or maybe you can log off and log on again. That sometimes works. Where is Terry? Salim, what's happening with Terry?
Sorry, I'm still on the phone with him. Okay.
Yes. Can we hear? Okay. So here's my suggestion. My suggestion is that we can actually move on to question 2 and 3, combine them together, because some people like Sharon, she needs to get off at 12. We don't have much time until that. So then we can come back and we actually can fill in the points that didn't, and also in the meantime, fix Carmen's audio, right? So I think, Carmen, if you don't mind, I think if you can log off, turn off, restart your computer, and then I think maybe the sound will work then. I mean, that's a lot of the times works for me. Hopefully it will work for you. But then we can also come and make up, the time that, so everybody can have equitable amount of time to speak, to engage, because we also, Terry, we haven't heard from Terry yet. That sounds good. Great, thank you. All right, so I would like to go, so the second question, Salim, you're with Terry, right? So I should ask the second question. Let me ask the second question, and then I really need to just take a little break from talking. Okay, so the second question was that what challenges did students confront as you faced the hostile administration, the government of California, SF Police, the National Guard, and the FBI. Some of you already spoke to that. So if you can actually include that, and some of you also spoke to question 3, which is the whole question: who had your back? Who had your back? How did you sustain your solidarity? A lot of you spoke already about that. So if we can actually maybe take like 90 seconds and then just address that, and then maybe go back and go to the next question about what lessons we draw, and how do we connect what happened then today with the pandemic. So how about we do question 2 and 3, the question of challenges, repression, and the question of solidarity, having each other's backs, and so on. And I know it's really hard, but 90 seconds. Can we try to do that? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Roger. I'm going to.
Yeah, I'm almost putting the two of them together in terms of the challenges, and a lot of that had to do with coming together and having a consensus as to how we were going to work. One of the initial things that was really critical was that the leadership of the strike would be directed from the Black Student Union and the TWLF organizations. And it was necessary to get an agreement with the other supporters that they would follow that mandate. And in the discussions with the various white support groups and political organizations, we were able to achieve that.
Can folks mute themselves if you're not on?
So in that regard, I mean, the challenge of constantly being in touch with one another, constantly sharing what it was that was being decided and how it was going to be followed up with the various types of support, people being willing to do things outside of the campus that were going to contribute to the continued ability of people to participate in the strike. I mean, in terms of the whole legal defense organizing that went on was huge. To be able to keep people available to participate, whether as strikers or as supporters, it just really made possible the continuation of the strike. Without that, it's really questionable whether we would have been able to have enough people around to have sustained the strike for that extended period of time. The other thing is, and I think a couple of people have already related to this, is the support among the various work organizations. The fact that the teachers were able to get recognized as a union and step forward in terms of being recognized as a legal representative of some of the faculty on the campus really prevented one of what's going to be probably the worst confrontation on the campus on the day that they received recognition by the by the city union council, because it was at that particular day and time, both the tactical squad and their police backup, as well as a pretty large number of demonstrators, were headed directly to a face-on confrontation between a couple of the buildings on campus. And probably a minute or two before those two groups were going to come together, the teachers union walked in between and with their strike signs indicating that they had received recognition by the council that they had a legitimate strike, and literally froze the police in their move to confront us, and enabled the strike to then proceed for a number of weeks afterwards. So
you're talking about the faculty union, Roger.
The faculty union, yeah. Not only the faculty union. I think that Steve's point about the support from the ILWU, also the gasoline workers or the oil workers from Chevron, and various other entities, as well as I'd like to at least acknowledge the staff from personnel from San Francisco State at the time, where no one that I have ever met during that time or since that time ever came up and confronted me nor anybody that I was associated with about what we were doing in terms of disrupting their jobs, their inability to have income as a result of the strike activities and whatever. That never happened. And it was pretty remarkable when you realize that, you know, the impact that the strike had on their lives went on for 4.5 months. And we don't really know to this day how long it took them to be able to recover, if they did recover, from the strike itself. So, you know, what's significant to understand about that is that there were a large portion of that particular group of workers that were people of color, although certainly not all of them.
Okay. Margaret, I was wondering if you can speak about international students and the students of, you know, like Iranian students and others. And I know Terry, I don't know if others, but Terry also kind of like spoke about Arab students and about the connection, and also that the president of BSU, actually the first president, was Muslim, Black Muslim woman, and so on. I'm just trying to kind of like make some connections internationally and also to the areas that like my students and I are particularly researching. So, but don't limit it to that, all of you. Yeah. You're muted.
What am I on? Someone muted me. I didn't mute myself.
You're not muted now.
I'm not muted now?
Right.
No, you're good.
Okay. I'll deal with Rabab's question first, and then I want to respond a bit to Roger and add on to it. One of the groups that was very supportive of the strike was the Iranian Student Union. Hosro Kalantari and others were very, very active, and they put themselves on the line because if and when they were arrested, they would immediately be deported, and because they had been fighting against the Shah of Iran, they would be killed if they were sent to Iran. People were really great about protecting Husserl because the cops wanted him so bad. But when they did get him, I got a call. I was getting people out of jail every night at the bail office. I got a call from where the person, Joe Gooden, in room 201, where I always filed the papers, saying, Margaret, you got to get Husro Kalantari out of jail now. They have let the Sabak in and they're torturing him. So I worked with the bail bondsman because he was on a very high bail. And since I had been orphaned, I had a house, and I put my house up. And I called the Iranians who had not been busted and told them what was happening and told them he was getting out to have a car ready. And the car was ready as soon as he walked down the stairs of 850 Bryant, and he took off. I had no idea where then. I found out since. And Rabab was so nice to have a friend who came in, a student who was doing research, come and talk to me. And I knew the Husserl had gone back, and I figured he was dead. He was a good friend. And when she told me that he was still alive, I swear to God, I just broke down in tears. She was very upset that she made me do that. I said, no, you made me happy. These are happy tears. The Iranian students and other students from other countries that were here were very supportive. Jack Alexis was deported back to Trinidad. I'm not sure of others who might have been. I know someone was deported back to Africa, and I can't remember his name. And I think that's from age. But a couple other things I want to add here. Number one, what Roger said about white students accepting the leadership of third world students, the Black Student Union. This was really important, and it scared the shit out of the administration, the state government, and the US government, because no time in the past had the leadership in a campus activity in an area outside of the South been led by people of color, where white people were willing to accept their leadership, and that scared them. What did that mean for the country? So that was really important, Roger. Second, one of the reasons people were able to get out of jail was because, number one, we bailed them out. We got them out as soon as possible. We raised money to be able to bail them. We got faculty and others to co-sign. It was a major operation. And then after people were bailed out, there was the legal defense part of it that took over in getting them attorneys. So people were supported and therefore allowed to be able to get back into the struggle. And, oh God, I can't even. You also mentioned the workers on campus. They were really key one day. I remember Bridges Randall was being chased by the cops, as he usually was. He was real fast. And he ran into the Commons, which was the old cafeteria for those of you who know San Francisco State. It's not like that monstrosity of a building now. Ran into the cafeteria and ran through into the back room. And the cops started to chase him. And I don't know who it was, but somebody just picked up a cleaver. And everyone else stood around the guy with the cleaver. And the cops knew they had better turn around. We had support, not only verbal, but very much physical, and people put themselves in danger for that day. So those are my comments. Bob, I can't hear you.
We're probably muted.
Carmen, we can't. Can you speak? Now you muted. You're muted now. Unmute. We can't hear you.
Carmen?
Carmen, can you put your phone number in the chat, the private chat, so Salim can call you and see if it can be fixed?
Maybe she can call by phone. That might be. She can get
Or maybe, but Terry was calling by phone too, and now Terry's not even on the screen.
This is a very difficult
I'm very sorry.
way to get together, because I know I had to bring my son down and that didn't work, and then Salim had to help me. It's not easy to get on.
Well, we're not like the kids now. The kids this is like
why do you think I called my son?
I wanted to actually, before we jump to the next, Salim is going to call Carmen now. I wanted to actually raise, in this particular context, 2 questions. When I was researching, and I'm continuing to research, I came across, and I don't know if you're aware of it, a report that was written for the national government for a committee for the prevention of violence and order and disorder. It is like, I think it was 118 or over 100 pages. And it's written by William Orrick. And one of the questions that it raises, it says, the biggest puzzle is that why San Francisco State, when they went and talked to San Francisco State students, they said, oh, we're not really interested in we don't have issues with free speech like Berkeley, because we can say whatever we want. There weren't issues and so on. So they were trying to figure out what's the puzzle. And they also raised another big concern, that this was a place that a big concern for the FBI and for the government was the fact that there were people involved with the Black Panthers Party. And that was a big, and there wasn't, what I read, I haven't finished the whole report, but it wasn't, I didn't see references there to the FBI, the J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, COINTELPRO, it wasn't in there. But there was a very big concern with that. So I was wondering, and then they said, well, the administration was so liberal at San Francisco State. So nobody could understand why is it that students actually went on strike and lasted on such a long strike. And reason I'm asking this is historical, but also what's going on today. What's happening today is also the construction of kind of the administration, so benign, so nice, so wonderful, is always hearing people, always talks about civility, you know. I mean, I know people of color and indigenous people and third world people always have a problem. Whenever you hear civility, you know about civilization, clash of civilization, quote unquote savagery and so on. But what was like, how did it, and how did you get students to actually like be disciplined around the BSU and third world liberation front leadership? I mean, it's people always want to do whatever. Okay.
Moving forward, I just want to say,
Salim, just say what's happening.
I have them both on my phone, so they can hear you and they can speak to you as well.
Okay.
Yes, she's. Yes, she's.
Here we are.
Yes, I guess you're here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we can hear you. Can you hear it?
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You wanted to.
What would you like to do now? Are we up? Shall we be alright? I think you were doing something from us.
It's not good. It's not, the sound is not that good.
This is not working. We're gonna try something else. So okay, we'll go back.
Well, I think
You can put Carmen and Terry separately, each one on speakerphone. This way we all mute ourselves and then come back to them. So,
well,
Sharon, I want to see, Sharon, do you want to, like Sharon, I don't see you on the screen. Do you want to say
she's
something?
muted. She may be gone. It's a little after 12.
No, I'm still here. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Sharon, do you want to take on question 2 and 3 before we, like go back to, go ahead, before you leave.
Just saying, what were you just asking?
The question was, what were the whole question of repression, the police, I was asking that there were all these reports about specific concern because the Black Student Union was very much connected to the Black Panther Party. And so there were all these reports that were published that had concerns about that. And their other question is that there was also this report for the national government was that San Francisco State administration was so nice and so civil. So why is it that there was a puzzle for the people who did this investigation? Why is it that there was a strike? I mean, these were two issues. There were a lot of other issues, but I raised these.
I was there, a strike because San Francisco State was so nice to us.
I think this is a national report that was published, led by somebody named William Orek, that was published for a committee of the prevention of violence, a national, not committee, a national for the government, national government.
The United States has never been nice to us, never been nice to Black people. Okay, we went on strike because we wanted an education that reflected us, that reflected our values. That's why we went on strike. We had everyone, I mean, we had the, in terms of there being, what are you saying, like the state students that were part of the Panthers? Is that what you're saying?
That what the report was saying. I mean, I do know that some of people in the Black Student Union were very much connected to the Black Panthers.
I mean, we had
Hank Jones and so on. Yeah,
we had everyone out there, not just the Panther Party. We had mothers, we had grandmothers, we had doctors, we had lawyers, we had everyone. We had the support of the community. No, the state was never nice to us. This world, this America has never been nice to us. We came here under conditions that were not nice. And it has never been nice since we've been here. We struck because we needed to have our education reflect our values. Okay, that's why we went on strike. We had the support, we supported one another, and we had the support of everyone else because it was time. It was time for this to happen. Everyone, not only us, not only the Black students, it was the Vietnam War, it was free speech, it was everything going on then. So we were just kind of, it was a melting pot, so to say, of all the ideas. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I
It's really great.
I was going to say the Vietnam War was a very important factor. I mean, we organized, for example, a Stop the Draft Week, where we surrounded the draft center in Oakland. It was black. It was poor people who were being forced into the war. Maybe somebody can silence. Okay.
Oh, fantastic. So what
we can hear you. We can hear you, Carmen.
Hit X. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Okay, Carmen, we can hear you. Hang up.
Now I'm good. So they can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
yes.
What should I do with the telephone?
Hang up the phone and talk in the computer.
Yes. Okay. I'm turning it up. Okay, I'm turning it up.
Don't touch the computer. Do not touch the computer. Just hang up the phone.
Touch the computer. Okay. Okay. So shall I hang up the phone?
Yes.
Shall I? Okay. Thank you very much, Salim. Bye.
Okay. Steve will come back to you.
Okay.
Carmen hasn't spoken. Yeah. Okay. Can you please fix?
Hello. Uh-oh. Now I can't hear you.
We can hear you. So, Carmen. So you should.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
You want me to speak now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, all right. I guess I'm going to start from the beginning. Let me see. I sent Rabab a copy of this. I've been doing some house cleaning, and so I'm throwing out a lot of things, and I found this, and I thought I would share it with you because it's from my high school, the Polytechnic Parrot. And I was the editor-in-chief. And I'm not going to read you all of it, but I'll just read you what I wrote on February 23rd, 1962. At Poly, we think not as separate racial or religious groups. We are Americans. We are individuals who treasure respect for human dignity and who believe that in unity there is strength. Prior to that, in the column, I had written about racism and about the divisions in the society. And I share it with you just to share with you the fact that I was very hopeful at the time, which I guess I still am hopeful, but I did have a lot of hope, and I was very involved in high school, began my political involvement. Just to summarize, during that time, and even before then, when we would travel, like say we would go to Mexico and we would travel up through Texas, and I remember as a child being confused by the signs that were at the gas stations for the bathrooms. You know, there was colored and there was white, and then I was never sure where am I supposed to go, or it said Negro and white, and it was very confusing as a child. But these in those times, there were actually overt symbols of discrimination and its underlying racism. I don't want to go through a lot of examples of that, but just to say that when I bussed myself out of St. Peter's School, where I had my primary education, as did Roger, I think, also, I buzzed myself out. I had a lot of conflicts with the dogma of the Catholic Church, and I just decided to go. And I went to Polytechnic High School, and my world opened up, because when I was growing up in the Mission District in San Francisco, there were primarily Latino families, Irish families, and Italian families. And that was the world. We almost never went out of there. I almost never went out of there. So going across town, taking buses across town to the Haight-Ashbury, which is where my high school was, opened up a whole different world. For once, I was involved in an atmosphere that was primarily African American. My high school was primarily Black, and then there was a large segment of Jews. I had never met a Jew, and then there were all these different people in there that opened up my eyes to many things. One of the primary lessons of being with other people, people who were so different from me and my cultural background, one of the effects of that is that I realized that whatever strengths came from my environment, my cultural environment, and whatever problems we had were also shared by other people. And I made wonderful friends at Poly High. Friends who took me, like Vanetta McGee, who was a movie star and worked with Danny Glover on many projects. Vanetta took me to the projects. I had never been to the projects. And I was able to visit with families that I never would have met otherwise, and to understand the similarities despite our differences. So this was very important, and by being in a multicultural environment, what happened was that I got more and more involved. And at that time, there was discrimination against Black people on Auto Row, which I don't know where it is now, but it used to be on Van Ness Avenue. It was all Auto Row in San Francisco, and Black people were discriminated against in hiring and so forth. And so I joined the sit-ins. I was in the sit-ins at Auto Row, and then I had many red diaper baby friends who were my contemporaries, including the founders and the leaders of the ILWU. Their kids were my friends, my comrades in high school. And so when UAC came to San Francisco to investigate potential communist infiltration in our unions, I sat in because my friends were being interrogated, and so I was sitting at UAC. And then when Woolworth on Market Street, some of you may remember that if you were San Franciscans, when Woolworth, where we used to go and they refused to sit Blacks at the counter. And so we sat in at Woolworth. I was there too. So my political involvement was very early, and it was tempered by my personal experiences, the experiences of my family, which I won't go into in a lot of detail because of our time, but also in the educational sphere, I was always a good student. I liked school. I liked to learn. I liked books. I loved libraries. I used to go to the Bartlett Library on 24th Street. And what happened was it was very dangerous because I started to read things that didn't coincide with what I was learning in school. So I made, what I did, and you have to remember the times, I think it's different now, but I would raise my hand because I was a polite kid, and I would not challenge, but ask decisive questions. And what would happen is I would get slammed down. I was treated very badly. And so I learned to kind of zip the lip. But I also knew that education was important for me, especially as a girl. I rejected, the usual norm for girls. learn to be a secretary, get married, have kids. I didn't want to do that with my life. So in order to survive in the educational system, I learned to absorb it and regurgitate it. In other words, I learned everything. I took the exams. I got A's all the time. I got A's, but I didn't believe a word of it because I knew they were lying to me. The whole thing was a bunch of lies. They said things that just didn't make sense, that didn't jive with my experience, that had nothing to do with the people I knew, with the people I was with. And so I said, okay, if that's what I have to do, I'll do it, but I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to participate in it. I'll just do it because I have to. It's a task. That was my philosophy. So in high school, what happened was Vietnam was starting to be a huge problem for the United States. And I got a scholarship and I went to UC Berkeley. There were a few of us from Poly who went to UC Berkeley, by the way. And there was what they called a tracking system. And people were just funneled into a variety of places where they could or should participate in the society. I was very lucky. I was in the academic tier, and I went to UC Berkeley on scholarship. While at Berkeley, I became even more political.
Carmen, is it okay if I interrupt you?
Absolutely.
Because now Terry has joined and his connection has, please do not mute yourself. Just stay the way you are. He keeps coming and going. I just want him to speak while the computer works. Now he's off. Actually, he's off. So I'm sorry, you can continue. But when he appears on the screen, let's have Terry speak.
Oh, there he is.
He's now back on. Please do not mute yourself. Just stay the way you are because your computer is working.
Okay, there's Terry.
Yeah, Terry, please go ahead.
Okay, I've been having I'm sorry, but this problem I've been having, this phone. I'm going to go. Salim has helped me.
Oh, now I can't hear anything.
He was okay at the beginning.
Oh. Well, let me just continue then until Terry comes back. So at Berkeley, there was only a handful of Latinos and a handful of Blacks as students at Berkeley, no teachers of our own ethnicity. But we kind of gravitated towards each other and we supported each other and we participated. By the way, I went to, I've gone to some exhibits at UC Berkeley. And when I look at the exhibits of posters for the free speech movement, you cannot see any people of color in them, but we were there. I was there. My Black friends were there. My brown friends were there. We were there, but we're not in any of the photographs. We were not in leadership and we were not recognized, but we were there. Likewise, we were beginning to see that our friends from high school, my friends from Polytechnic High School had been, I was going to say abducted, but I don't think that's the term. They were, the army took them. And so they were going to Vietnam. And what was happening with Vietnam was that my friends were coming back in body bags. I had a good friend who was in the Merchant Marines, and he would come over to visit me and he would tell me that he just, was suffering because he had to be handling and looking at these body bags all the time. That's what it was like to be a young person at that time, listening to all this, knowing all this, and learning more about the problem of participation in Vietnam when we knew that our own countries of origin had also been invaded and were also causing tremendous problems paid for by United States tax dollars. It was just really terrible. I lived on Bryant Street at that time, Bryant and 21st, and my neighbor was a guy named Tony. And every morning we would leave. I would go to UC Berkeley and he would go to UC Berkeley, but I was going as a student dressed in my uniform of boots, pea coat and other protective gear because we were going to the demonstrations. And he would go in his uniform because he was in the National Guard. And so we would greet each other at the door, and, you know, we would wish each other well that day. We were still neighbors. We were still the same culture. We were still the same people, but we had different tasks. He was doing what he had to do, and I understood that. I was doing what I felt I had to do. So we were active in the anti-war movement. As I said, we were a handful of Latinos, a handful of Blacks. That's it. But we were gravitated towards each other, gave each other support. At that time,
oh, I'm sorry.
just to say, when I moved from the mission, you know, to establish myself, you know, more in the Berkeley environment, my roommate was a member of the Black Panther Party, and so I was very close through her to the events in the party, and we were all, you know, kind of, you know, the Black students, especially my flatmate, was very much involved in the issue of Back to Africa movement, kind of seeing that there was very little hope of changing the nature of societal norms in this country. I was more hopeful, although I was at that time very much involved in supporting what I saw south of the border, and in looking at the constant migrations as the United States took more and more aggressive and pernicious policies towards Central and South America. So when I graduated from UC Berkeley, I was ready to, you know, to go out into the workforce, and I found out that with a degree from UC Berkeley in psychology, I was qualified to sell shoes. So I decided I can't do this, and I kind of, you know, what do I do now? And I had mentors in the Latino community in San Francisco. There were people there who said to me, you need to go on, you have to get more education. You know, you need to continue, because that's how you will be able to be more useful and more helpful in our community. So I said, okay, but I've got to take a break. I've got to see, you know, I've got to see what this is all about. Remember, we were as young people, as people in college, you know, we were struggling with ideas. We were trying to figure out, where do we go? What kind of a society do we want? You know, if we put cogs in the machine, as Mario Savio used to say, cogs in the machine, stop the machine, but then what? Then where do we go? And so we were looking at all the socialism, communism, what do these things mean? We were exploring our ideas. Now, during that time, we thought, well, the best thing to do is to go see for ourselves. And so I took a year off. I worked 3 jobs. I had a regular Monday through Friday job, and I had a night job, and I had a weekend job. 3 jobs, and I saved as much as I could so that I could take some time to travel. And the travel that was important was my first trip to the Soviet Union. Now, we were poor. We were students, and we were poor students, so we stayed in campgrounds in the Soviet Union. And that was really marvelous because we got to talk to real people. My traveling companion, who was my Black Panther Party flatmate, was fluent in Russian, was a Russian major. And so, you know, we were able to communicate with people in the campgrounds and to learn a lot about what life was like in the Soviet environment. The good and the bad, because I noticed right away that the Politburo at that time did not have any women, and it also did not have.
When was that?
This must have been 67, 66, 67. No women in the Politburo and no minorities, even though how many of the Russian states were actually Asian? You know, all the Uzbekistan, all of those countries were Asian, and there was no representation. So this was of concern to me. This was of great concern. On the other hand, I saw other things such as women having jobs that in the United States you wouldn't see. At that time, women were driving streetcars in Leningrad and Moscow and doing a lot of things that in this country were unknown. But it was a great lesson. It was a great set of lessons for us in terms of viewing a different society and what was possible and the problems with it. And I'm going to stop because I think.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm actually, I want to just say I'm intrigued. Like, I don't want any of you to stop. And I want to say a couple of things. One is that many times people say to us, why do you have so many people on open classrooms? But I think like something like this, that we invited 68 strikers and it snowballed, and those of you connected with each other. And so which stories we're going to say are not valuable, please come in and tell us, because all you are saying that every time somebody says something, I want to jump, I want to respond. I studied in the Soviet Union, so I actually know some of the stuff you're talking about. I've also, my father studied at University of Tennessee in the 50s and actually was directed to colored bathrooms. I mean, he experienced racism in the US. He refused to serve in Korea, in the US war on Korea, and also the US had given him a green card because he became stateless in 1948 after Palestine fell. They took it away from him because he refused to go serve for the US war in Korea. The whole question that you're talking about McCarthyism, you're talking about the newspapers we used to have were always cut. We never ever got a newspaper in Palestine full because it was always cut by the censor. Even the whole question of, I think it was, who was speaking about, maybe Tomasita, you were speaking about how Roger went to the mission and talked to the gangs and so on. And there is the whole construction of sort of like our people on people crime. And now recently, actually, there's a huge movement in Palestine where the Israeli government is pretending that they're going to help with Palestinian on Palestinian crime. And every week now, there have been tens of thousands of demonstrators saying that actually the Israeli police is involved in perpetuating that by spreading so many guns among our, and just in case, just so you don't get confused, there's so many Palestinian flags, and the chants are all against that and rejecting the intervention of the state in perpetuating that. The stories are so similar. What you are talking about, what we're talking about, the whole McCarthyism, the whole silencing and so on, the ways in which it presents itself, I think it's really, really important. I'm not going to, I have so many things to say, so I'm going to stop. But I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that we're not going to be able to get through everything. We're going to have discussions and so on. I want to actually, like the minute Terry can come on? The minute Terry can come on, and then like just basically,
I was going to.
People, but when Steve, just Salim, what's happening with Terry? Can you let us know?
Yeah, so what we're going to do right now, he just needs a few more seconds to get ready. But what we're going to do right now is I have him queued up on a messenger video call. So what I'm going to do is when he's ready, I'm going to screen share my screen so that you all can see Comrade Terry and hear Comrade Terry. And he'll be able to hear you, but he won't be able to see you. So he's actually been listening onto what you've been saying. He just needs a few more seconds. So if maybe one more person wants to go.
Steve, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the Vietnam War.
Is ready,
okay,
we're going
yeah, that's fine.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Are you good?
Okay, so wait.
Okay, he's okay. All right, I'm going to screen share him. Give me a few seconds.
Let's wait for Terry and then we'll come back.
All right, Comrade Terry, you are ready.
Okay, I'm so sorry that my phone and whatever's happening is happening. It's never happened before. I've had things about Haiti and nothing happened. But this one seems like I don't know what's happening in my phone. I just can't get through. But I'm gonna thank Salim for helping me because my technical skills is very limited, extremely limited. So where do I start? Cause I missed so much. Comrade Bob, where I start? Well, I say this one thing. Say this. What Comrade Bob is doing is what we envisioned at San Francisco State, the community. For example, when we fought through that struggle, it was basically just for our identity. And it was basically, we felt like we being left out. We was being left out as a person, somebody from the community. And so our whole concept was to bring the community and the school together. The school was where we learn theory. The community is where we put it in practice. Right. So at BSU, we definitely felt that way. So we went out and recruited. I mean, we was a recruiter. We went out to schools and actually brought them in. I even went out to some schools, high schools, and told them, "Yeah, you have to come." You know what I mean, they thought I was crazy. You have to come to school. So our whole thing, in my opinion, was, in fact, when I first came to San Francisco from LA, and I was here for about a week, and I joined the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Because I didn't have no concept of even going to state college. It didn't in my mind. I mean, it was just out of the question. Going to a four-year college to me was just out of the question, because that's, I was raised in a small town in Indiana, southern Indiana, 13,000 people, you know what I mean? And to go to school, go to college, that was out of the question. You got a job, that was it. So when I came to San Francisco State, in LA, I had been, I was older than everybody. I was 31 years old when I came to San Francisco State. And I'd been traveling around, did a lot of travel. I've been hitchhiking over Europe and Morocco and different places like that. So when I came, I got in. Of course, everybody knows how I got in. Roger got me in. And so I had no concept of what a 4-year school is supposed to be. So when I came in, my whole concept was that, they had a telephone there in the place, so I was going to organize. And that's just the way I thought. So I was the oldest. So already I had some work. I had done work in the community before I even got to school. I had to do draft counseling, because I tried to do it in LA. Me and a Chinese brother and a black brother tried to do draft counseling in LA. We did the best we can, but we didn't know what we was doing. So when I came up here, I had to learn what I was doing. But basically, San Francisco State, to me, basically was a place where we could organize and go to the community and what we learn there and do it to the community. I mean, so, and one of the things, it's like what right now, what AMED is to me, is basically what we had in our eye, what we thought about, what was in what we felt we should need to do. I mean, learn a theory in the community, in the school, and put it out in the community. So we felt everybody. We felt, in other words, as far as somebody like Mary Rogers and Eloise Westbrook and Cecil Williams or Hannibal Williams or anybody should go and come and teach. They need a whole bunch of letters after their name. They could come to teach for us. And so we felt it was the people who should do the teaching. So our whole concept of Black Student Union, I mean, that's the whole concept of Third World Literacy came from us. People don't realize, but that concept came from the Black Student Union, because we felt that we had to bring all kind of people together. I mean, at least when I came to Stanford, I was talking about third world. We're coming out of my mouth all the time, and told everybody that BSU to get a passport.
Terry, don't go. Don't please stay with the screen, because you haven't had a chance to. We had a question about the repression by the state and the solidarities and people having, each other's back. And if you can do that in such like 2 minutes, but don't disappear, don't stay here, so we can actually bring in the others, so everybody can participate in that. But these are the questions we ended up, and there are some of the comrades who haven't had a chance to actually respond to them. So if you want to speak to that, and then I know that everybody wanted to say something, and then I think we should just have maybe 15 minutes to open it up so our students can also jump in. So do you want to speak now, or you want to I don't want to lose you. Repression. Repression. Yeah, you heard what we talked about, the whole report that we've heard. That I
missed a lot. I missed a lot. So basically, let everybody else speak. Let people speak. I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to bring you back.
I think Terry was important in bringing in internationalism, as I remember.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that's very important is our fight against imperialism.
Hold on. I'm going to say something. I'm going to just leave it for everybody to kind of like interrupt and have a discussion and so on for like the next maybe 7 minutes or so, and then we can like ask, bring in comments if there are questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh,
It's a community.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the important things in our struggle at San Francisco State was against imperialism. You know, at that time, the United States was supporting South African apartheid, the apartheid regime. And we were fighting against that, as is the United States supporting Zionism now in the Israeli state, the apartheid state. But, you know, we look at fight against imperialism, it's connected to the fight against racism. Because during Vietnam, it was a fight against the Vietnamese people. It was a racist war that was going on. And today you have this Biden attacking China and whipping up racism really against Asian people in the United States. So it's the same. Imperialism means an attack on people of color. That's what it's always meant in history. And I think we were making those connections. And I think that this struggle today is very relevant. I mean, because it's not just Trump. It's not just Trump and the Republicans. The Democrats are supporting more money for wars abroad, to the encirclement of China, attacking Russia, and this whipping up of xenophobia, which, you know, is at a high degree compared to what we faced in the 60s, is very dangerous. And it's terrorizing people because of their color and blaming people in this country, immigrants and others, for the economic decline of U.S. capitalism. And I think that it's very important today to make those connections, because during that period, and this is what the FBI and the capitalists were against, the state, we were organizing against the war. We had 4,000 people who surrounded the draft center in Oakland, SDS did, and many others. And we were fighting against U.S. imperialism. And the same is necessary today. We have to unite people in this country. What business do we have sanctions on Venezuela, sanctions on Iran, basically people dying because of U.S. sanctions? It's terrorism against the world. And when Biden says that Putin is a killer, is a killer, what about him supporting the Iraq war, bombing the people of Iraq, bombing the people of Libya? This is what we're talking about: rank hypocrisy and whipping up a war atmosphere against other countries for what the United States is doing. And I think another thing that we took up in SDS, and we did a lot of educating, is what the United States was doing in Central America and Mexico, invading those countries, creating economic havoc so that the refugees were people were forced out of their homes to come to this country as a direct result of U.S. imperialism in Mexico and Central America. So the same struggles that we had in the 60s are very much today in front of the burner today for people in the United States. And we have to stop this corrupt reactionary system, really, and that's what it is, where the Democrats and Republicans represent the billionaires. And it's the same at San Francisco State, where Palestinian students have been terrorized by the Zionists. Posters have been put up. There's an attack on Palestinians in this country and at San Francisco State, and there's silence by the Democrats and Republicans. In fact, they're trying to control the ethnic studies program, so it won't include the struggle of the Palestinian people. So this struggle really continues, and we need to do the education that's necessary to make these connections.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I just want to add a couple of things. One is that I kind of brought you up to where I was at when I came to San Francisco State for my master's in psychology. I had all of that background, and the reason I raise those issues is because they're, and which can be applied to today, as Steve is saying, is that we came in many different colors, and by color I don't mean necessarily color, but I mean different shapes, different experiences, some with more or less political understanding, some focusing on this or that issue. But we had to find the commonalities. We had to find the threads that could weave us together to be able to, to move together forward in our case with the leadership of the Black Students Union. But we came from different places. Even if we were of the same culture, we were not the same. We were different. In Latino culture, for example, I mean, there were organizations formed for Latinos which were, basically supporting the military. How could I support the military when I knew that they had overthrown the elected leadership in so many countries in Latin America? I couldn't do that. I could not support the military. But I sent care packages to my friends who had been drafted and who were in Vietnam. I was able to separate a love for the people from hatred for the policies of a corrupt government that was doing terrible things, not only here to us with its racism, but abroad in larger scale. Now, one of the things that I have noticed tremendous is there have been changes in the American, the overall American culture. When I was a youngster in San Francisco, in my 20s, I remember going to social events, and if there was any political discussion, I would many times be told to go back to Cuba, where I came from. Now, I had never been to Cuba at that time. I hardly knew very many Cubans because they were not a large number in San Francisco. But I was told to go back to Cuba. I think now people are more sophisticated, have more knowledge. I think they're a little bit more sensitive. But there's still a tremendous amount of ignorance.
I'm not sure. After I criticized President Wong when he welcomed Zionists to campus, I received an email from a Zionist that said to me, "Why don't you go back to Ramallah, Mogadishu, or Iran, or Tehran?" I'm not Palestinian, but I'm not even from Ramallah. So this is I think the way it plays out is that there is so much. There is so many ways in which racism plays out, and there is so many ways to divide and rule, and there is so many ways in which racism, imperialism, colonialism come together.
Yes.
And the question around poverty as well, that really tries to kind of separate us and set us separate and say, oh, this doesn't concern you. This doesn't concern you. Black Lives Matter doesn't why should Palestinians care about that? Why should Asian people, when something happens against Asian people, why should anyone else? And the whole question about, like when we keep talking about the way we teach Palestine according to the indivisibility of justice, thinking about one framework that's actually really critical and talk about that, it becomes a different way of actually like separating us or saying that, oh, you want to have ethnic studies? Then you really need to actually sell out Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians, which is now the battle in the California. But it's not just about Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims, actually. It's really about the essence, because when we were sued, and one of the first charges in the lawsuit was against the 68 strike. The second one was against the College of Ethnic Studies, against the conference in 2009. I mean, this stuff. And yesterday there was an article, big article by this right-wing guy who actually was criticizing the Third World Liberation Front. We don't have time, but that's why I'm saying there is so much discussion. How this stuff keeps getting regurgitated again and again and again. And the goal is to divide and rule. The goal is to actually keep us away from each other. So each one of us thinks we're separate interests. And then, of course, it's very easy then to keep us under control, captivated, killed, tortured, deprived of resources, and so on. Because then they throw at us and they say, here, the little crumbs, fight over them. And we say, no, we don't want the crumbs. We want the whole pie. And I'm not talking only about the whole pie in the United States. I'm talking about the whole pie in the world, about questions of social justice, different kind of world, and so on. And of course, some people are critical that this is not something we should be teaching about, because we should only be talking about the classics, which is, by the way, the Zionists and right-wing, this is what they're asking. We should go back to the classics. Why are you teaching about Black studies? Why are you teaching about Why are you teaching about third world studies? Why are you teaching about indigenous studies? This is not something we should be. And this is why you all went to do the strike. I'm going to get off my pulpit and just throw it back at you. But I just want to say to the audience that we're not going to be able to have questions, but the comments that you've asked for, the flyers and so on, we will provide them, and we're going to have more discussion. Just please say so. Salim, if you don't mind, just put the evaluation form so people can actually let us know that you want to more of this. Tell us, and we will be more than happy if our esteemed guests and this inspiration folks are willing to come back. We would love to have you again. So I'm going to take it back to you for anybody who hasn't spoken, and maybe Terry also, but everyone else. And if you want to go over, we can go a little bit over. We don't have to stop exactly at one, but some students may want to get off, and some panelists may want to get off. Some people may want to get off. That is fine. We can extend, maybe 15 more minutes if you are all okay with it. So you're a collective speak. Go ahead. Take it back. Roger, did you want to go ahead?
Roger. Raj.
Mm-hmm.
I unmuted you.
Okay. Speak.
Okay, so what? That's it. I'm just going to sign off, and just thank you for the invitation, and it's great seeing all of you. And let me know when we're doing something down the road. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Margaret, I can't hear you.
Go ahead.
You're muted.
Unmute yourself, Margaret.
I'll do it for you. 1 second. All right, you're unmuted.
Okay. I don't know how that happened. I don't touch the computer. My son has told me, don't touch it. I just wanted to say something because Rabab reminded me of something. One of the first things I learned to chant was Shah is a fascist puppet, down with the Shah, because Husserl taught me that. And I think that the internationalism is really important because the United States has taught us to be US-centric. We don't know anything about the world unless we hear it through the main media, and then we only hear it when it affects the United States. And we would be surprised at how much people in other countries who have been exploited are like the people here that have been exploited. Mm-hmm. The only way we will know that is if we are educated to that. Why I really think what Rabab is doing is so important. I had never known that let me just put it this way. I was sitting on a bus in London, and these two people started talking, and this one woman said, "Oh, the Irish, they're dirty, they're lazy, they overpopulate." And do you want to know what my mind just flashed on at that point? The same thing that was being said about people of color in this country. It happens all over. In Paris, I saw it happening to the North Africans. They had the same thing said about them. We denigrate people so that we feel better. And that's what we have to get away from by realizing that we have so much in common and we really have the same enemy. And the enemy is that system that allows some of those to profit off of others of us. And until we get that in our mind and get rid of it, we're going to have a problem. So we must educate. And Rabab, I thank you for being the one person I know at State who is still doing that. I tried when I was teaching there. Yeah, I subverted a lot of students as I was
To
told.
be fair, there are a lot of my colleagues who are doing it, but there is a way to keep us apart from each other. So there isn't the continuity and connection. But I know Tomasita wanted to speak. I know Diane wants to speak. I know Terry wants to say something. I know Carmen and Steve, you haven't finished. So Tomasita, go ahead and then pass it on to Diane. And I will go to Terry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Yes? Okay. I wanted to thank all the educators everywhere around the world. Education is really
The sound is really
hear.
bad, Tomasita.
Yeah.
Can't hear you.
So
Maybe
so
you
can't hear.
stay away, stay a little bit farther from the computer. Try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just want to thank all the educators in the world. Okay, how about here?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I want to thank educators around the world.
No.
Okay. Talk to your elders. Hear this? Okay, talk to your elders. Talk to your grandmothers and grandfathers. Ask them to tell their stories and also their, you know.
I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
I
Okay,
can't.
I think culture, and so keep your
Who's
culture,
talking? I can't hear.
ancestral culture.
Tomasita, Terry, Tomasita.
Okay.
Tomasita was saying was talk to your grandparents, talk to your elders. We actually had a project in AMED saying احكي لي يا ستي احكي لي يا جدو, tell me grandma, tell me grandpa. When we first started, when there was a goodwill before actually all the resources were taken away. But that's another conversation. But that's really, really, really important to hear from people and so on. People fill out the evaluation form. Okay, so can we let's go to Diane and go back to Terry, and yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Tomasita, and thank you for the land.
Love you.
And thank you for everything, Diane.
I can't hear Diane.
Okay. It's at moments like this where the whole community is organized that you are able to make social change, but also that you're able to learn a great deal. And we were able to learn from each other. We were also very well organized. And I think that's something that we were able to contribute and that we're still contributing, that our generation, our generational experience is alive today. I'm very active in Detroit eviction defense, and we try to save people's homes. And I think that was born out of the experiences that we had that really convinced us that we had to continue to be agents for social change. And one of the things that really inspired us at that time, yes, internationalism was important, but our communities were important too. And the fact that we had the Japanese community come to San Francisco State and stand with us, the Chinese community, the parents of the students, the high school and grammar school teachers, all the pact that we had with the oil workers made us understand that our community stood by us, and we, of course, in turn had to stand by our community. It's been a very nice to see all of you on the program today.
Yeah.
We go to Terry. Terry.
Okay, one sec. I'm going to bring him back on. And you should see him now.
We see him. We see him. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, also that I'd like to say that something happened here that never happened before. The police, the black police, and the brown police created officers just because they did not want to come out to protest blacks. There's only one black police came out there because it was Patterson. He was part of the thing. So that was another thing that happened. But basic as everybody knows, if the community didn't come to our aid, I mean the community, I mean didn't come to our aid, we'd been in big trouble. We've been in big trouble. I mean, so that's our whole concept now. Is basically if a university or college cannot relate to the community and have it completely involved, like I said earlier, people from the community should be coming to class and teach. They don't have no damn degrees. Just come to the people and tell the story. Like Thomasine said, these elders have come to tell their story. Because in my opinion, we don't have too much time left. With the climate catastrophe going on now, it's a climate catastrophe going on right now. Because these imperialists, these capitalists have destroyed the planet. I mean, their whole concept is the resource. And first we were resourced, black people were resourced, then the Asian people were resourced. And now right now, all the countries of the world, for example, in Africa, for example, which we had so much hope in, a lot of them have been completely, the government's been overthrown, Lumumba, Nkrumah, and all of them. And the same thing has happened, it's decolonialism. So we don't have a whole lot of time left. And you youngsters, the youngsters definitely gotta really up the thing. I mean, one of the things I feel is people got to get together and have political education. You got to start talking with each other. They got to start younger because this social media is cool, but you got to have an analysis. You got to have a collective analysis of what's happening. So you got to start reading books and having people get together and have political education classes. You got to form groups, communal groups together. For example, what's happening to the Asian people, especially old people, that should never happen back in the day. We wouldn't let nothing like that happen. I mean, to some elders like that. So what I'm saying basically is that the youngsters right now have to really understand that there's a lot of work to be done and there's not too much time left. That's all I can say right now.
Yeah, I was muted. Thank you. I wanted to ask if there is any lasting comments from anybody, Steve.
Well, I think that struggle and
there is a lot of echo. Yeah.
Summer, Alabama.
It's not good. The sound is there is a lot of echo.
Can change.
Do you hear me?
I can. Is that better?
Something wrong.
And maybe we're being not this problem either. I don't want this, but it seems, these techniques here.
Steve, you're sounding weird. Not what you're saying because I can't understand it, but you don't come across it slowly.
You're the same also. The same thing, Mari. Okay, so I'm gonna say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Salim, I'm gonna turn it over to you because I'm sure you haven't said anything to kind of like have any closing final words, and also get the chance to breathe myself.
No, I mean, I wanted to. I know I'm unfortunate at the last stretch we're having more complications. I don't know where that's stemming from. Our apologies. I think. Oh, you're frozen now. Okay. Yeah. This was an amazing event. I want to thank every single one of you. I also want to echo the words of Professor Abdulhadi, where she says that we need to have one-on-one interviews with every single one of you. This conversation does not end today. This has been wonderful, wonderful and engaging and nourishing space to be in. I want to thank you all. I do think we should close. We're at 1:06. Thank you again for all of the time and effort and labor you've put into being here today. It's been absolutely amazing. I live off of this stuff. This is my research, student organizer. So like, this is, I'm just gonna right. So thank you again.
Good.
It's been a pleasure. if you want to, I think we're going to close the space now. So thanks again.
Take care. Solidarity.
Bye,
Solidarity.
everybody.
Solidarity.
Thank you, Celine, for helping me try to make this technology.
Good.
Now,